Moving on, Kenya risks facing a red meat crisis if low funding towards the livestock sector and inadequate training of personnel persists. The country is already in a meat deficit situation and relies on neighboring countries to supplement its high demand. The Kenya Markets Trust, in a report on the state of livestock in Kenya, projects that red meat consumption will nearly double as the population increases, yet lack of harmonization between the national and the county governments continues to present a challenge, aggravating an already bad situation.
With a growing population, the upward trajectory of the demand for meat is a given. The supply side, however, has plenty of hiccups. The agriculture sector receives less than 4% of the national budget, despite its disproportional contribution to the health and wealth of the economy. Experts contend that the sector is grossly underfunded, leading to the myriad of challenges that the livestock sector faces, including inadequate technical personnel.
The pace at which now we are trying to align the policies, the strategies, and the regulations to devolution is not fast enough to enable us to keep pace with what we are supposed to do as counties. Whereas we are supposed to be in charge of crop and livestock husbandry and management at the county level, a lot of resources are still retained at the national government.
According to the sector's analysts, the government has failed to employ new researchers and technical personnel since the 1990s, when the agricultural sector became liberalized following the introduction of structural adjustment programs by the Bretton Woods institutions. They are now pegging their hopes on renewed investment into the sector by county governments.
The county government needs to design some of the fiscal incentives so that the private sector can find value in livestock business.
The report reveals that the hides and skins subsector in Kenya is underutilized, with the bulk of hides and skins being neglected and in some instances being sold at throwaway prices. Lillian Kiarie, NTV.
And a story by Lillian Kiarie, which essentially deals with shortage in terms of meat and also leather products in the country, now sets the stage for our conversation in studio, where I am joined by Leela Prasad, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Al Farama Limited, which is a tannery at the river. I have Beatrice Mwasi, who is the Secretary General of the Leather Apex Society in Kenya. And I have Robert Njoka, Director at Redamark Leather Center in Kenya. Welcome to the show. And we are talking about the leather sector, and if you could just speak from that conversation where we were having a discussion around there is low skilling, there is low funding towards the leather sector. Just to get your thoughts, immediate thoughts in terms of what you pick from that story, and what are some of the challenges facing the sector as we speak? If I could start with you, please.
Yeah, I believe the problem here right now is that the leather industry in general, globally, is going through a bit of a slump. And as the story mentioned, you know, there is a huge demand, an increase in demand for beef globally, whereas the demand for leather has been pretty stagnant. So what's happening is that there's suddenly an oversupply of hides and skins. And what happens is, because of that oversupply, the industry is now very particular about the quality of hides and skins which are used to make leather. So in that situation, unless the quality is really good, the global demand is not there. So which is why, you know, as the story mentioned, there is some hides and skins which are going underutilized. So that's the reason, because the quality is not there.
Beatrice, if I could get your thoughts in terms of there's oversupply in the market, and clearly the issue of quality and standards regulation becomes a challenge. Do we have adequate measures for standards regulation in this country?
The standards are there. I think the biggest challenge that we are facing as an industry is enforcement. To pick or tap into the story is actually like a bittersweet kind of a presentation. On one side, we have a growing demand for beef or meat. Therefore, we are going to have, you know, continuous supply or a sustainable supply of raw material. Now, the biggest challenge that we are facing at that particular point is a very poor offtake of the raw hides and skins due to poor slaughtering practices at the abattoir or at the slaughterhouses. And this is mainly because most of the people, operators at that level, are not well trained. So we feel like interventions in terms of capacity building, so that then what we are getting out of the slaughterhouses are quality hides and skins. So if we're able to enhance quality, then the offtake of the raw material from the abattoir will be higher. Now, if it is higher, then now we can even start holding conversation about value addition or about increasing our participation in the global marketplace in as far as leather is concerned. Okay. So standards are there. We are still in the process of enhancing and building on the current standards, but the most important thing is enforcing even the existing standards.
I agree. And Robert, just to get your sense around this, the issue of the state and the quality of abattoirs or slaughterhouses is really emerging in this particular conversation. Yeah. What's your assessment of the present state?
Thank you so much. What I'm saying is the main challenge we have, even if we have got abattoirs, the abattoirs status, they are not the right quality. You find the people who are supposed to be working in the abattoirs, the frayers, they are not well trained. So, and also the tools they are using, especially for fraying, is also a big challenge. And even if we'll be having good frayers in the market, then we also have got challenge because the hides and skins quality do not start from abattoir. Actually, it start from animal husbandry. Yeah. And that's why you see currently, in early days, you used to have system of artificial inseminations. We used to have cattle dipping, animal dipping the cattle, which is no longer existing. So you find currently what we're receiving in the industry, mainly there are many man defects. And that makes the tanneries not to consume the material. Yeah. And if the tanneries are not consuming the material because of the quality, then what will happen? You'll find a log of those material laying in the warehouses because it's the quality, even if you purchase as a tanner, it will not give you what you require in the market. Okay. So if the government work it well, and what we are saying now, during the devolution, when the government worked on devolving these activities, there was no proper setup system. When we devolve hides and skins, improvement, do we have officers in the field? You find the officers we have in the field, many of them, they have retired. So even if you want supervision of abattoirs, we have got only meat inspectors. Okay. And the meat inspectors, they are only qualified for the meat. Currently, we are happy our current CS is joining up with the county governors to see that whether we can bring sanity in these abattoirs. Okay. So, and we will be able to collect a few shortfalls we have along the value chain.
We'll be taking a look at that issue of devolution and the national versus devolution in terms of roles a little later on. But now let's look at some high-level numbers. And if you look at the data that we have from the government, export volumes of leather have been declining and export revenues have been equally falling. 2014, we were exporting about 26,000 tons. As of last year, we were just 23,000. And in terms of export revenue, we moved from 8 billion shillings to just about half, which is about 4 billion by now. Why is this the case, Leela?
Again, it goes back to the raw material quality. Unfortunately, when the raw material quality is low, there is no demand for Kenyan leather, processed leather or hides and skins in the international market. And unfortunately, still today, Kenya is very dependent on exports versus the local market. While a country like Ethiopia has a flourishing local industry which converts its hides and skins into leather and into finished shoes and bags, Kenya is still dependent on the international market. But we are not enforcing the regulations that are there to make sure that there's enough good leather to export. So there's tanneries that have already invested big time in value addition. But the problem is when you don't have a properly available raw material, you cannot export. Yes. And globally, as I said, the industry is really struggling right now. So that means that prices are lower, that means revenues are lower, that means margins are lower for tanneries, and that means that people are not willing to take risks anymore.
Beatrice, if you could help me understand this, there's a stratification which I don't seem to get within the leather industry in the sense that when we look at the international market, as you just mentioned, our handbags seem to be doing very well, but shoes on the other hand don't do as well. Why is this the case?
I'm really excited that we're beginning to talk about our share of the global market. It's quite big. It's the global market for leather and leather goods is about 150 billion USD. Kenya is holding a very small share of 0.14. So really that is very tiny. And then as you're rightfully saying, it is dwindling, it's going, we are experiencing a downward trend. So to me, I think the way I look at it is first, we need to win ourselves as a country from dealing in semi-processed.
Okay.
products. Right now, about 95% of what we are exporting is in form of semi-processed leather. That is basically wet blue and crust. Literature research has actually indicated that if we were to add value of the semi-processed that we are exporting into finished goods, we will accrue 12 times the value that we are accruing right now from the marketplace. So it boils down to value addition. So as he rightfully says, we have some players in the industry that have invested in value adding. But you see, if you look at the statistics, the facts and figures, very little of that is happening. Now, we have players, of course, some who are dealing in leather goods, bags, other fashion accessories, and we have those that are dealing in footwear. So as you're saying, those that are focusing on fashion accessories, including handbags, are targeting the high end. And they've perfected the art of creating goods or products that are really responsive to the needs at the high-end level of especially even international markets, plus also local markets. Yeah. So a bigger number of players are those that are actually engaged in footwear production. Yeah. And they are challenged in a couple of ways. Challenged in terms of innovation, being able to create products that are responsive to trends. Kenyans are very fashion-oriented individuals, consumers. If you're not giving them things that are trend, that they consider to be trendy, then there will be no buying the products that we're making. So you find that a bigger percentage, in terms of the current statistics that we have, are those that are actually, producing the footwear at micro enterprise entities. We are talking about clusters such as the Malindi clusters, we are talking about Karioko clusters. People are really trying, they're coming up with products. But when it comes to, being responsive to trends and quality, you find that they are a bit challenged. Another area that we are challenged in terms of being competitive in comparison to other players that are global players is in terms of price competitiveness. Yeah. So if you're looking up to Ethiopia, Ethiopia is a bit more cost effective in terms of producing footwear. A study done by World Bank indicated that it costs around $9 USD to produce a loafer in Ethiopia. It costs around 13 here to produce a loafer here in Kenya. So even up the road, Ethiopia is even more competitive. Going further down, going to Asia, China, India, it is even much cheaper to produce. And that is why right now you find in terms of statistics, you're seeing Kenya importing more footwear than we're producing locally. Out of the 42 million pairs of shoes that we buy annually, Kenya is only able to produce 3.3 million. Now, really, that is a very big deficit. So to me, I feel like we need to enhance our productivity. We need to be able to reduce the cost of production. We need to up innovation so that we are responsive to trends. And then we also need to create a critical mass of highly proficient individuals, players in the industry, be it those that are fashioning the products, those are managing enterprises. All players really need to be very well skilled to be able to undertake leather entrepreneurship.
And Robert, just the sense here seems to be that we have a bit inconducive environment for operation. But if you look at the recent past, there have been a number of interventions. In 2014, CS Eden Mohammed rolled out this task force, which was supposed to revamp the leather industry. In 2017, I recall there was a revolving fund, about 130 million shillings, which was set up, partially funded by PTA Bank. Do you feel we're intervening in the wrong places, or what's happening?
Thank you so much. Sorry to say that, yes, the government is so keen in carrying the intervention in this industry. But unfortunate, and I said very unfortunate, that the people given the responsibility of implementing that intervention, they are not doing it in the right way. You have talked about 130 million given out. And there before we had about $1 billion given out. But you see, the release of the fund where it's supposed to be used, which is a big challenge to our Kenya policy on corruption. You find a plant like Kenani, where we are supposed to have the industrial park, which has been worked on for the last 3 years. You'll be shocked to go there and find that even the money we are hearing the government has put in place, you cannot get value of it. Even when you try to do the evaluation of what has been done, cannot give us even 25% of what we do here the government has released. So it is very unfortunate the government is so much willing. And you remember also the other day, the president said currently the armed forces and disciplined forces no purchase of their product outside this country.
Correct.
And much has been taken because that alone was developing a local market. And as one of the speakers said, what challenge we have is much of our entrepreneurs, or much of our leather productions, we want to put it in international market. But I can assure you, if we create favorable conditions for the local market, about the issue of lacking market, the issue of our height not going to the market, we have got a lot that can be done. And as Madam Beatrice has said, if you look at the Karioko cluster, the production per day can't be compared with the big plant we have in the country. So, and if you look at that one, the government bought equipment worth about 200 million about 3 years ago. I'm talking about intervention. They wanted to have the tools so that the hard work can be the lightest scale. But you can find 3 years down the line, those equipment, they have not been put to use. Okay. So even if the intervention is there, the implementation, the policy follow-up, it is not there. Yeah. That is one of our biggest challenge that we have in the industry. Even if the government is doing so much to help the industry, we have got problem with the implementation system.
I see.
Yes.
And you have a rebuttal to that?
Yes, no, I just wanted to add to what he has said, and quite right, because if about 80% of players in the leather industry are micro, small, and medium enterprises, and most of them are operating within clusters such as Kariako, we can't really grow the industry if we do not consider how we are going to make such a segment of our value chain productive. And it's through interventions such as the one that he has pointed out, common manufacturing facilities that can up productivity among the micro and small enterprises, because then they'll be able to access modern technology from shared facilities where then it becomes easy and more affordable. Why I say this is that the reason as why, for example, earlier I said Ethiopia is more price competitive. The biggest reason is because, you know, cost of power is cheaper in comparison to Kenya. Can we make power accessible to those of us who are in manufacturing or in value adding more affordable so that then we can compete? Second thing is that we do not have a very solid support industry base, you know, kind of guys who will supply production inputs. So most of the production inputs we are using in the leather industry is imported. So, but it's like, just imagine a small micro entrepreneur getting into fashioning of leather goods and asking him to import fittings and accessories that they require. Individually, they cannot. So interventions such as common manufacturing facilities or leather wealth creation centers, whereby we create clusters and encourage people to pull their capability to compete, is the way to go. But the most important thing is the moment we pronounce that, we need to enforce. We need to policy enforce. We need to have proper follow-up so that whatever we say that we purport to do is actually done.
Lila, if I can get your thoughts around this. We're talking about 42 million pairs of shoes purchased annually, and just about 3 million which is sourced domestically. That's about 7% of the aggregate demand. When you talk about this Mitumba discussion, the second-hand imported, from where I sit, you can't blame the consumer because I want the most cost-effective price point.
Absolutely.
Where do you think will be the breaking point for the local leather manufacturers to begin to compete effectively?
I think, again, as Mr. Joka and Mrs. Beatrice said, it's really important for us to build an ecosystem within Kenya where manufacturers find it viable to manufacture in Kenya, sell in Kenya, and also export globally. Now, one of the things that can really help in that is certain policies to be put in place. For example, right now, a shoemaker, while they can get the leather here and a few other components, not everything is available in Kenya, whether it is quality-based or whether it is price-wise. Yeah. So they have to still import most of their components. But what happens is the moment you add a 10% duty or a 20% duty, it becomes very difficult for them. So some policy changes, like making it duty-free to import components for footwear manufacturing or bag manufacturing, that will really help the industry here. Not only that, but also some sort of restriction or enforcement on import duties of finished footwear. That will also make it more competitive for local manufacturers to really sustain in this market.
But to be fair, I mean, we're now signatories to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and we're supposed to be liberalizing our markets and we ensure there is no tariff restrictions. Right. How do we expect to compete with this kind of framework? Because the moment we're opening our borders, then, I mean, it effectively means our leather manufacturers will just go out of business.
No, I think it's, you see, if you look at the issues we're facing today, it's not coming from our fellow African countries. The issues, the imports are coming from China, the imports are coming from India, the imports are coming from Southeast Asia, countries like Vietnam, where labor is so much cheaper, where governments in those countries are giving incentives to manufacturers there to export. For example, in a country like India, if a company shows that they're exporting, say, 80% of their manufactured goods, they're automatically given about 10 to 15% of their revenue. The government just refunds it back.
Incentives.
Yeah. So imagine so we cannot compete with those kind of manufacturers. Yeah. So yes, when we're opening up as an African continent, that's not an issue because it also opens up to a larger market for Kenyan manufacturers.
Sure.
But the issues we're facing is from Indians, from Chinese, from Vietnamese manufacturers who are looking to export here.
Okay. And Beatrice...
No, let me add something on what you have asked about East Africa. You find sometimes it depends on the policy within the country. Look at the footwear. A country like Rwanda, they don't have a single finishing plant. And they have banned the import of second-hand shoes in their country. Yeah. The question will be asking we Kenyans with this big capacity, what is making us not even to have a high duty on the imported shoes to make sure that we have got a better platform for our local consumption? You see, it looks, the policy set, we have got problem with our policy setting up. Because with that, you find there is no way an investor, even the local investors, will just put an investment unless you are sure of your return time. Without return time, then I don't see it possible for us actually, even if the doors they are open or they are closed, it still remains the market is not viable.
Okay.
But all what we are saying, we are lacking is stability of our policy.
But Mr. Njoka, if you follow that argument that you're having, if you read the budget statement for 2019-2020, the Treasury will easily ask you, do you want us to choose import substitution or export promotion? Because from the reading of the budget, it seemed like they went for the export promotion. There's now a 10% export duty proposed to ensure that at least we don't export semi-finished, to the best of my knowledge, to ensure that there's value addition.
So let me correct you there. Yeah. That is true. But you see, they didn't calculate. As it was said there before, 90% of the leather exported is in form of wettable. That is semi-finished, okay? But all what we are saying is, do we have the capacity to utilize that production of about 10 million square feet of wettable in the market? So it is not there. So at this time, that's why the industry players were saying, fine, we agree, it is good for us. But can you give us time to develop the capacity to utilize the 10 million square feet we produce on a yearly basis?
Okay.